Well, Southern stories have always appealed to me. Growing up in Texas and Arkansas and living most of my life in those states, in Louisiana and Georgia and North Carolina, very exposed to Southern characters, Southern literature, and Southern landscape. So it's always a part of my life, and every now and then I want nothing more than to escape. But I'm always going to consider it home, and so it's always a great place to return and tell stories of others and tell my own. The movie Joe is based on a novel called Joe by the author Larry Brown, who I was lucky enough to have known a little bit when he was alive. I worked on a documentary. I was a production assistant on a documentary about his life called The Rough South of Larry Brown that was directed by Gary Hawkins, who then adapted the screenplay for us. And being exposed to Larry and just having those afternoons of sitting in the sun, hearing his stories and telling him a few of mine was very inspiring. So the opportunity to make this film, including the writer Gary Hawkins, and to be able to work with such a fine cast and bring that story to life that's been with me for a long time as a novel and as a screenplay and as an enthusiast of Larry's work was just an honor. I feel like in many of my films, I'm very curious and interested in exploring the question of of the presence of masculinity in a man's life. And I think it's never been any project I've done where that's more front and center than in Joe. I'm fascinated by Joe. I have great sympathy for Joe. At the same time, I want to be like the sheriff in that film sometimes and grab him by the collar and say, I'm like you, I fuck up sometimes, but we got to get our shit straight. And I feel like there's nothing greater than an admirable man with very fatal flaws, with cracks in his character that are very frustrating for him to deal with internally. And that's it's not always easy for him, and it's not always accepted by society. Joe's a guy that has his own law, disregarding any sort of code of his culture. He has his own code, and I really approached this, and in my conversations with Nick early in the construction of the character, as we would a Western, a character piece about redemption, about a man trying to ease his own pain and his own perception of himself through the hope and strength that he can empower this young character played by Ty. And so it's in many ways him trying to become a father figure and redeem himself culturally for the harm and pain that he's caused a lot of people along his own soulful path. Well, for a director to have the opportunity of working with an actor as dedicated and magical as Nicolas Cage is a dream come true for me. I've seen all of his films, and many of them are films that I saw early in my life as a film enthusiast, and have loved the charisma and talents and risks that he's taken and the roles that he's conquered. And in many ways, I discussed my eccentric path of my own career, and I'm just really in awe of Nick's as well, and not taking the easy way out, but challenging himself, challenging an audience, not necessarily making the obvious move, and that's something that I have great respect for. So when he responded to the script, if I could do backflips and was flexible gymnast, I would have done all sorts of gymnastics and contortions because I was so excited to sit down with him. And then it was cool. He came out to Austin to sit down and talk with me about it. And I was at a point where I was location scouting for Prince Avalanche. I was getting ready to go into production on a different movie, and so we explored the locations for that film together and got to know Joe at the same time. And so there was a beautiful kind of a path that we took together creatively that really inspired the project that wasn't even related to the project we were talking about. And having that kind of a camaraderie and collaboration was just, a gift to the creative process. As much as it's an honor to work with an actor as acclaimed and prestigious and brilliant as Nicolas Cage and as fresh and exciting and inviting and adventuresome as Ty and Ronnie, it's also an amazing experience for a director to have the opportunity to work with a performer like Gary Poulter. We called him Ozzy on the set. He was a man discovered by our casting directors living on the streets of Austin, Texas, where we shot the film, and was just a larger-than-life character. He'd be a performer on the street one day and talk about his past engineering degrees and intellectual accolades, and the dark path that he'd taken in life and the joys that he hoped for in the future. And an amazing sense of humor, an amazing sense of charisma within this man who'd lived a very hard life. And when we invited him to participate in the movie, it was because there was something within him that I really believed in needed to be expressed. There was a beautiful performance waiting to escape this man, and it was very clear in our initial auditions. He came in to his first audition to read for a little bit part, have a couple of lines, and then I said, "Oh, how about read for this other part? How about spend a day with us and read for a little bit bigger part?" And he came in and read for that, and he was just incredible and very natural and utterly real. And then I said, "Why don't you come in and read for the third lead in the film?" And he came in and he knocked my socks off, and he committed to the role, and you know, he helped us in ways that I can't even describe, really find an authenticity and an honesty to this story of that's in many ways very brutal, very tragic, upsetting, and violent, and somehow he found a way to thread the genuine humanity that he had into a very villainous character. He passed away shortly after the production, which was a great loss because, you know, as we talk about on the set, he was going to be the next great saloon keeper in a Western or a Civil War general in a movie, in an epic, you know, masterpiece to come. And this was his story, and we got to play with him in his final days, and it was an amazing experience. I have a very unusual career if you were to lay all of my films out here on this table and look at them one at a time. But there are threads, there are themes, there are subtexts, there are characters, there's actors, there's technicians that thread them all together like this bizarre quilt. And someday when I'm 80 years old and have made 47 or 48 films, we'll start to see how they connect. I don't really have a perspective on it. I have a great energy for being very productive and working very hard every day. I film things. I'm in production as often as possible, really dedicated to each project one at a time. And there aren't necessarily obvious connections from one to the next, other than a whim I might have or a passion that might seize me or an opportunity that might knock on my door and take me by surprise. Joe was something that is, as a novel, has been in my head for a very long time. The reality of making a film is as dark and complicated as Joe is not an easy task. You have to be in the right headspace. You have to have the right actors willing to accept very challenging roles, the right crew willing to roll up their sleeve and work really hard and visually realize something as challenging as this material would be. So I really look to every project much like a character actor would. I like to disappear into my work, and sometimes I even surprise myself by the way it connects to the last one or the one 10 years before. Joe was my 9th feature film, and I think it's very distinctive. It stands out from all of the previous films in a way that I'm utilizing tools, educations, accessories, things that I've learned over the last 13 years of making feature films, and they all add up to Joe, just as that body of work plus Joe will all add up to my next film. And I plan to be confusing myself and all of you with each project to come.